Imagine a place where the worst of humanity is locked away, where the line between justice and cruelty blurs, and where chaos can erupt at any moment. This is the world of prison riots, where desperation, anger, and violence collide in a perfect storm of mayhem. Today, we're diving deep into the most disturbing prison riots in history, events that shook the foundations of our justice system and left scars that still haven't healed. But before we step into this dark chapter of human history, let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered what it would take to push someone to their absolute breaking point, to make them risk everything, even their lives, in a desperate bid for change or revenge? Well, buckle up, because the stories we're about to explore will challenge everything you thought you knew about human nature and the limits of control. Our journey begins in 1971 at Attica Correctional Facility in New York. Picture this: over 1,000 inmates, fed up with years of abuse and neglect, suddenly seizing control of the prison. Guards taken hostage, demands shouted from rooftops, and a tense standoff that would grip the nation for 4 long days. But here's the kicker. When the dust settled and the tear gas cleared, 43 people lay dead, including 10 hostages caught in the crossfire of a botched rescue attempt. Attica wasn't just a riot. It was a wake-up call that echoed through the halls of power, forcing America to confront the harsh realities of its prison system. But Attica was just the beginning. Fast forward to 1980, and we find ourselves in the scorching heat of New Mexico's penitentiary of Santa Fe. What started as a drunken brawl quickly spiraled into 36 hours of pure, unadulterated hell. Inmates, high on drugs and drunk on power, unleashed a wave of brutality that's hard to even comprehend. They tortured and mutilated their fellow prisoners, turning the prison into a nightmarish landscape of blood and fire. When it was all over, 33 inmates were dead, and the scars left behind would haunt both survivors and rescuers for decades to come. Now, you might be thinking, surely we've learned from these tragedies. Surely things have gotten better. But hold that thought, because our next stop takes us to Brazil in 1992, to the infamous Carandiru massacre. Picture a powder keg of overcrowding, disease, and despair, suddenly ignited by a simple prison yard fight. What happened next was nothing short of a slaughter. Police stormed the prison, guns blazing, in what they claimed was an attempt to restore order. But when the smoke cleared, 111 inmates lay dead, many shot at point-blank range. It was a stark reminder that sometimes those tasked with maintaining order can become the greatest threat of all. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about a riot that didn't just shake a prison, but an entire country. In 1990, Manchester's Strangeways prison became the epicenter of the longest prison riot in British history. For 25 days, prisoners held the rooftop, their silhouettes etched against the sky like some twisted revolution. They were fighting against overcrowding, poor conditions, and a system they felt had failed them. And while the riot itself was eventually quelled, its impact rippled through the UK's prison system, forcing long overdue reforms and changes. Now, I know what you're thinking. These riots, as horrific as they were, happened in the past. Surely we've moved beyond this, right? Well, let me introduce you to the Altamira prison massacre of 2019. Yes, you heard that right, 2019. In a grim reminder that the issues plaguing our prisons are far from solved, rival gangs turned a Brazilian prison into a battleground. The violence was swift, brutal, and shockingly medieval. When the dust settled, 58 inmates were dead, many of them decapitated or asphyxiated. It was a stark reminder that even in our modern, supposedly civilized world, the powder keg of prison violence is never far from igniting. But here's the thing that really gets under your skin. These riots, as shocking and disturbing as they are just symptoms of a much deeper problem. They're the violent eruptions of a system under immense pressure, a system that too often prioritizes punishment over rehabilitation, control over compassion. And until we address these root issues, the threat of the next big riot will always be looming just around the corner. So, what can we learn from these horrific events? What do they tell us about human nature, about justice, about the thin line between order and chaos? Well, for one, they remind us of the immense responsibility that comes with imprisoning human beings. They show us that when we strip away dignity, when we ignore basic needs and human rights, we create a pressure cooker of resentment and despair that's bound to explode. But there's another lesson here, one that's a bit harder to swallow. These riots force us to confront our own attitudes towards prisoners and punishment. They challenge us to ask whether our current system is truly serving justice, or if it's just perpetuating a cycle of violence and despair. Because let's face it, a society is often judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members, and that includes those behind bars. Now, I'm not here to preach or to offer easy solutions. The issues surrounding prisons and criminal justice are complex, nuanced, and deeply rooted in societal problems that go far beyond the walls of any one institution. But what I am here to do is to make you think, to challenge your assumptions, and to maybe, just maybe, spark a conversation about how we can do better. Because here's the thing, every single one of those rioters, every guard, every victim, they were all human beings. They all had stories, families, hopes, and fears. And while we can't excuse the violence or the crimes that led them to prison in the first place, we can strive to create a system that doesn't push people to such desperate extremes. So, the next time you hear about prison conditions or inmate rights, I want you to remember the stories we've explored today. Remember the lives lost, the trauma inflicted, and the lessons learned. Because only by confronting these dark chapters of our history can we hope to write a better future. One where justice and humanity can coexist, even behind the cold steel bars of a prison cell. And with that sobering thought, we come to the end of our journey through some of the most disturbing prison riots in history. But remember, the conversation doesn't end here. It's up to all of us to keep asking questions, challenging the status quo, and working towards a world where such violent uprisings become relics of the past, not headlines of the present. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and never stop questioning the world around you.